Welcome to South Africa. I love wines from South Africa. I love talking about South African wines because of all the different styles, grape varieties, and all the creativity that we find in winemakers in South Africa. Um, it is a funny thing because we normally talk about South Africa as being part of the New World, non-European countries, countries that have a more recent winemaking history. But if you look at South Africa, really, wine was already being made before the left bank of Bordeaux had even vineyards planted on it. So, although it is classified as a New World wine producing country, it is actually older than certain parts of Bordeaux in France. One of the remarkable things about South African wine in general is its ability to deliver value for money. Contrary to what certain consumers think, that South African wines are cheap and not very good, South African wines can be absolutely fantastic, as you will discover as we go through the case, and deliver fantastic value for money. Parts of South Africa can be very hot, a little bit too hot for quality wine production. The winelands are influenced by two different currents, one coming from the Indian Ocean, another one coming from the South Pole, that cool the lands that are close to the sea, giving the chance of vineyards here to produce high quality wine. One of the biggest challenges of South Africa, and if you have been watching the news and looking, you will see, is that during summer, South Africa can be very dry, even in the winelands, no rain, which creates a very favorable condition for wildfires. And very sadly, over the last few years, we have seen historical important vineyards in South Africa being completely destroyed by wildfires. And as our climate changes, these dry seasons become even drier, even hotter, and can last even longer, which is just exacerbating the issue. But now, coming to a brighter note, I'm very excited to take you through a small journey of South Africa. We will take different journeys, but this is an introduction to what South Africa can be. And we're off to a fantastic start with sparkling wine. This wine that we're going to drink, and it's called Method Cap Classique, classic method, traditional method. It is South Africa's homage to champagne. It is not South African trying to imitate champagne, but it's paying homage. It's a very unique and standalone style of traditional method sparkling wine, which also delivers a great value for money. The producer here the winery is called Genevieve. The wines, and I'm very passionate about this producer. She's one of the female winemakers that we work with, and she's making headway in South Africa into very fine Michelin star restaurants because, as you will be able to taste, her wines are absolutely amazing. The winery is called Genevieve to pay homage to the saint patron of Paris. And this wine is a Blanc de Blanc wine, so it's made from 100% Chardonnay. Genevieve, Melissa produces a very small number of bottles, a very small production, between 18 to 20,000 bottles a year, which is nothing. One of the largest brands of Cap Classique in South Africa will produce from one of their wines 1.5 million bottles. So Genevieve is very small, it's boutique, and Melissa focuses heavy on quality. So this is 100% Chardonnay from very old vineyards, and the wine is aged. Once the second fermentation that creates the bubbles finishes, the yeast dies, and the wine is aged on that yeast for over 3 years. Best way to describe this wine, in my humble opinion, It feels like a sword wrapped in silk. As soon as you try the wine, you will feel the focus of the acidity, the focus of the flavors, wrapped in the beautiful silky texture that comes from the bubbles, with the notes of pizza dough, sourdough, plus green apple, lemon zest, and a chalky minerality that runs through from the front of the palate all the way to the end of the palate. I hope you enjoy this wine. And we're off to our South African journey with the first white wine of the case, which is from a winery called Blackwater, owned by Francois Hasbrook. We love Francois, very tall, funny South African guy, a very, very skilled, passionate winemaker, and you'll be able to taste this in this Chenin Blanc. A little bit about the grape. So Chenin Blanc is not a South African grape, it's a French grape. Its home is the Loire Valley. It's native of the Loire Valley. But it is in South Africa, really, that Chenin Blanc found its spiritual home. It's developed and grow and now it's been planted in a lot of regions in South Africa and produces all sorts of styles of wine, from sparkling to dessert wine, wines that can be drunk on an everyday basis, wines that are rich and complex for you to drink on an occasion to celebrate. And it is, the variety is very extensive. This particular Chenin Blanc comes from the Swartland, north of Stellenbosch, from old vine Chenin Blancs. Why am I saying that? Because old vines will produce a smaller crop of grapes with more concentrated flavors. And all those flavors will end up in the wine once the juice is fermented. This Chenin Blanc was barrel fermented and then aged in barrels for 10 months. You will find when you taste the wine, you see that the wine has a lovely pale golden color. The color comes from the barrel aging, with a very fine but yet round acidity. The wine feels fresh without feeling acidic. It has a lovely texture that comes from one Chenin Blanc, having that texture of beeswax, as well as from barrel aging. Lovely notes of peaches, melon, red apple, lemon zest, and a delicate aroma of vanilla and cedar that makes the wine very complex. You will also notice that the flavors of the wine are going to sit on a palate for a very long time, which means this wine has a very long finish. And then right at the end of the palate, you will pick up a very subtle, lovely flavor of walnut. I hope you enjoy it. I chose for the second wine of the case, of course, Chardonnay. Chardonnays can be a little bit divisive in the sense that every now and then in our shops, sometimes you hear customers saying, I don't drink Chardonnay, or being part of the club, anything but Chardonnay, ABC. I'm also part of the ABC club, always buys Chardonnay. And this is the reason why I chose this particular Chardonnay. This Chardonnay comes from Stellenbosch. Most of the most prestigious, quality-focused wineries are going to be found around the Stellenbosch because of the climate, because of all the different types of soils that are offered, because of the mountains and valleys that exist around the Stellenbosch. The state, Bartany. Bartany started actually with a Selfridges director back in the 1920s, traveling in this area, seeing the natural beauty around the Stellenbosch, and deciding to buy land here, build a house, and retire here. Then a few decades later, the Jordan family took over and further developed the vineyard. One thing that's very particular to Bartany and a couple of other wineries here is that the Jordan family, they are very environmentally conscious. And since they took over the vineyard, they decided to try and replant the original vegetation that existed around the vineyard in the past. Since they took over, they have replanted over 7,000 trees around the vineyard and restored the habitat to a point where a stream that hadn't run down the valley for 70 years is now running. This Chardonnay, this wine is 100% Chardonnay. It has been barrel-aged for 12 months in French barrels with 30% new oak. What does that mean? For every 10 barrels of Chardonnay, 3 were new, the others were pre-used. Why did the winemaker want to do that? It's just to control the amount of notes, the amount of notes of vanilla, cedar, and butter that you find in the wine. As you are tasting this wine has a delicious note of cantaloupe melons, lemon zest, beautifully marked by the oak, cedar, vanilla, slightly buttery with a very, very, very long finish. So I hope you enjoy it. And we're off to the red wines of the case. South Africa does produce a lot of high quality red wines because, of course, there's enough sunshine and warmth here to ripen black grape varieties. So I decided to choose a slightly lighter style of red for us to continue our journey. And from Stellenbosch, where we were with Barton Chardonnay, I would like to take you to Cederberg, high up in the mountains, over 1,000 meters above sea level, to a vineyard called Driehoek. Driehoek is so high up on the mountains that a few meters up from the vineyard you find an observatory. Why am I talking about altitude? Because this wine is made from Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir doesn't do very well in very warm climates. It tends to lose its acidity and become quite germy and not very pleasant to drink. But here it's so high up that it's way cooler than it is on the bottom of the valley at sea level. So it helps. The cool climate helps Pinot Noir retains its acidity, its elegance, its perfume, and this is what you will feel on this Pinot Noir. Charles de Troyes, the owner of Driehoek, has aged this wine in French barrels for 12 months. And as I'm sure you can smell now, as you swirl the wine around in your glass and take a sniff, you will pick up lovely notes of maraschino cherry, ripe strawberries, raspberries, as well as cloves, smoke, vanilla. And because this Pinot Noir has now some bottle aging, you will be also picking up aromas of wet forest floor and mushroom. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this delicious, fruit-forward and yet elegant Pinot Noir from Driehoek in Cederberg. Now, this would not be a complete South African discovery journey if we didn't show Pinotage. Pinotage is, in my humble opinion, the national black grape variety of South Africa. Why do I say that? Because one, it was created in South Africa for the South African climate. Pinotage was a cross made at the University of Stellenbosch in 1920 between Pinot Noir, the wine we tried before, and Cinsault. And the cross of those two grapes gives Pinotage the ability to withstand the heat that comes from Cinsault, as well as the perfumed aromas and the acidity structure that you will normally find in Pinot Noir. There are several different styles of Pinotage in South Africa. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the big, luscious, heavy chocolate toffee style of pinotage. This is a fresher style, more fruit forward and more food friendly. The winery that makes this wine is the Cape Wine Company, and the wine is called Nieuwe Haarlem. You will see on the label that there's a picture of a ship, and Erlang, the winemaker, decided to call this wine Nieuwe Haarlem to pay homage to a Dutch merchant ship that ran aground in the bay, not far from where actually this vineyard is planted. And the ship was so badly damaged that the crew had to come to the shore and take all the goods that they're transporting with them onto shore. Eventually, part of the crew was able to board another Dutch ship and travel back, but part of the crew had to remain behind to look after the goods that they had offloaded from the ship. And amongst those goods, there were cuttings of European vines. And the crew decided, because they were going to be stranded there for so long, they decided to plant those cuttings and create a small vineyard. So Erlang decided to call his wine Nieuwe Haarlem to pay homage, not just to the ship that ran aground, but to the brave crew that stayed behind and end up planting a vineyard. This wine is 100% pinotage. It's being aged in oak for 10 months. Some pinotages, and this is not the case of this one, some pinotages can have, in my humble opinion, a quite unpleasant smell of burnt rubber. But as I'm sure you can note here, this pinotage has fantastic notes of cranberries, red currants, blueberries, blackberries, underlying spiciness that comes from oak in terms of cinnamon and cloves, and a very subtle hint of smoke. It will feel the tension of the acidity on your palate, refreshing the wine and giving it a very supple character, very fine, powdery tannins, and a quite long finish. And we arrive at the last wine of the case, and I chose a truly special wine for you to try at the end of this South African journey. It comes from a winery called Rainbow's End, also in Stellenbosch, actually not very far from Bartony, the winery that made the Chardonnay in this case. The winemaker here is Anton Malan, a fantastic winemaker, very skilled, but above all, a great human being. And everything here is done organically. And I chose this particular wine to show you one of the styles of red wines that makes Stellenbosch very famous, which is the traditional Bordeaux blend. This is a red Bordeaux blend, including Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, all of which grape varieties that do quite well in Stellenbosch because of the level of sunshine and warmth that is required for these grapes to ripen properly. After blending the wine, Anton will age these wines, and then at the end of the aging period, which is 12 months, he will sample barrel by barrel that's in the cellar, and he will choose a selection of the best barrels, the best wine that he's got, put the small selection together and calls it the family reserve. This is the family wine, a wine that has reserved for the family, composed from the top barrels that he has in his cellar for each vintage. As I'm sure you have already tasted or are tasting now, you will feel that this is a full-bodied red wine with a very ample middle palate. It fills your palate, fills your mouth. It has quite a bit of tannins in it because of Cabernet Sauvignon, but you will have noticed that the tannins are velvety. They are very smooth. lovely notes of blackcurrant, blackberries, plums, a very subtle whisper of eucalyptus, and then cedar, smoke, vanilla, dark chocolate, a little bit of coffee, and right at the end, a note of mocha. And I'm prepared to bet that if up to this wine you weren't hungry, when you try this wine you will be, because Rainbow's End Family Reserve is very food friendly with all that complexity, the tannins, the acidity, the alcohol. It lends itself really well to be paired with rich dishes such as casseroles and slow cooked meat, barbecue, or as the South Africans call it, braai, and steaks. So I hope you have enjoyed our little journey through South Africa. And if you have enjoyed, please keep an eye on our website, because we'll take you again through a different journey in South Africa to show you all the creativity, quality, and fantastic wines that South Africa has to offer.